I had a conversation today about the Force, which sounds, a little strange to say it, but when you consider how often we play Star Wars, it makes sense. Specifically, we were talking about the Force as it's represented as an experience for the character in Force and Destiny. And that expression is different from how it was expressed in Edge of the Empire and Age of Rebellion. In those two games, play is not really concerned with the fall to darkness or possible redemption. I suppose you could say that it's focused on perhaps falling or doing your best not to fall. And, if a group is interested in bringing that exploration into those games, they certainly can, either purely through the narrative that, this character is behaving so vilely with such evil intent, then clearly they have fallen. Or if they become tempted by some other, form of dark force sensitive, then narratively it may be decided by the group that they have embraced the dark side of the Force, and that's fine. But Force and Destiny is a game of a different color. It is explicitly focused on the internal struggle in the Force sensitive between that temptation, right? The lure of giving into their emotions, giving into the sense of power, giving into the easy access to ability that is represented by the dark side, compared to the struggle to maintain resistance against that constant temptation and the apparent lack of reward for your conviction. Force and Destiny is all about that internal condition, and so it comes with a mechanic to govern it. A mechanic which provides a lot of what we call granularity, a lot of detail. Like everything else in the game, the mechanic is pretty straightforward and simple. Using powers that have been flagged from the outset so that everybody's aware, using Force powers that are flagged as being representative of requiring surrendering to the temptations of the dark side, a character may earn what's called conflict. They earn points of conflict during the session. And if they commit acts, using the Force or otherwise, that are considered by the group as ruled on ultimately by the game master as evil acts that turn them toward the dark side, then they again are given points of conflict. And at the end of a session, 1d10 is rolled, and the points of conflict are used as the measurement, the target number that you must deal with. Rolling below the amount of conflict that you've earned causes you to slide down on your morality scale, slide closer to the dark side. Beating that target number, or at least tying it, will allow you to maintain or even improve your morality. And there are some who feel like this is too simple a mechanic, or that it in some way hamstrings their role-playing, and it's really for that reason that I'm making this video. In my experience, it's often better it provides let's say a cleaner role-play experience if the question of are you affected by something is handled by a die roll. And I mean this pretty much across the board, whether or not you take damage, whether or not you succumb to some kind of toxic vapor in the room, whether or not you're swayed by an attempt to persuade. These things are often resolved more cleanly through a simple mechanic. The question of, am I or am I not affected? But after that, that's where roleplay begins. And one of the things I like so much about the Force system in Fantasy Flight Games, Star Wars role-playing, is how much it can inform roleplay. Starting at the very beginning, you have this white D12 with, dots marked on it representing the light side of the Force and, ostensibly the dark side of the Force. Now, in Edge of the Empire and Age of Rebellion, the dark dots are treated as null. You have no access to the Force via the light side at this time, and without access to the light side, you're not accessing the Force unless you give in to the dark side. I kind of like that pull. It's a conscious decision. Right? It's a conscious decision to choose the dark side. Well, that is a role-playing decision. Right? You have tapped into that raw emotion. You've tapped into that side of your character that wants, that needs, that thinks it's right that they involve themselves in this way, despite what their instincts, what their connection to the Force is telling. I like that. Even if it's something innocuous, like pulling something across the room, right? That little die is telling you that doing that action is giving your character the risk of slipping toward the dark side, and you get the challenge of figuring out why. And you get the challenge of figuring out how that's represented in the room. Are other people aware of it? Is there something that's going to be changed in your behavior because of it? And when you get into Force and Destiny and are dealing with your morality scale, right, how close you are to the dark side, how close you are to being, a living example of someone who follows the light side. People around you can notice. People around you can sense that there's something off about you if you're sliding toward the dark, or they can sense their ability to trust you or be inspired by you if you're rising toward the light. And as you act in the world, you become responsible for that. And you either do or do not earn conflict, and you either do or do not slide up and down, or slide primarily in one direction, up or down, on that scale, based on your choices, and based on the die roll that tells you how you were affected by this experience. You commit some terrible deed, and yet, as a result of the roll, you discover that you've come out of that experience having gained morality. How does this happen? Right? How is it possible for you to have committed this terrible act out of anger, out of jealousy, out of whatever, and yet come out of it with a greater commitment to the light side? How is that possible? Thinking that through in the terms of your character, in the terms of the scene, in the terms of the game and its genre, can give you whole new role-playing opportunities. For example, you are, when you sit down to think about it, mortified by what you have done and vow never to do that again, which will make subsequent temptations all the sweeter.